Every farm in North America has known this for 100 years. Every city homeowner has been paying $15 to $20 a liter for the commercial version of the same thing. Used motor oil, the oil drained from a vehicle engine at every oil change, is one of the most effective wood preservatives available for exterior timber applications. Fence posts, railroad ties, deck beams, barn boards, retaining wall timbers, and any wood in direct ground contact or continuous weather exposure lasts significantly longer when treated with used motor oil than when left untreated or treated with most water-based commercial preservatives. This is not an obscure folk remedy. It is documented practice in agricultural and construction communities throughout North America, Australia, and Europe. It is the reason that fence posts on working farms last for decades, while the treated lumber posts at the garden center rot through in 8 to 10 years. And it is the reason that the wood preservative industry, generating approximately $1 billion in annual sales, would prefer that the connection between the oil change under your car and the rotting fence in your backyard never occurs to you. The oil in your engine right now is doing the same job in wood that commercial preservatives do. It just costs nothing because it is a byproduct of a maintenance procedure you are already performing. To understand why used motor oil preserves wood, you need to understand what kills wood in outdoor applications, because the mechanism of preservation follows directly from the mechanism of deterioration. Wood deterioration in outdoor applications occurs through three primary pathways. Biological degradation, the consumption of wood cellulose and lignin by fungi, bacteria, insects, and marine borers, is the most significant cause of structural failure. Moisture cycling, the repeated swelling and shrinking of wood fibers as moisture content changes with weather, causes mechanical fatigue, checking, and cracking that accelerates biological attack by opening pathways for moisture and organisms. Ultraviolet degradation, the photochemical breakdown of lignin by UV radiation, causes surface graying, erosion, and checking that exposes fresh wood to biological and moisture attack. Effective wood preservation addresses all three pathways simultaneously. It must provide a toxic or inhospitable environment for biological organisms. It must reduce moisture uptake and the cycling that causes mechanical fatigue. And ideally, it should provide some protection against UV degradation. Used motor oil addresses the first two pathways directly and the third partially. The petroleum hydrocarbons in motor oil are toxic to the fungi and bacteria responsible for wood decay. Creosote, the traditional commercial wood preservative used on railroad ties and utility poles for over a century, is itself a petroleum-derived compound, a coal tar distillate whose preservative action is based on the same hydrocarbon toxicity to organisms that motor oil provides. The petroleum compounds penetrate the wood cell structure and create an environment that fungi and bacteria cannot colonize and consume. Motor oil's second preservative mechanism is water repellency. Petroleum oils and water do not mix. Oil-treated wood resists moisture uptake far more effectively than untreated wood or water-based preservative-treated wood. Reduced moisture uptake means reduced moisture cycling, which means reduced mechanical fatigue, checking, and cracking. The wood maintains its structural integrity longer because the mechanical stress of repeated wetting and drying is reduced. The penetration depth of used motor oil, particularly when applied hot or to dry wood, exceeds that of most water-based commercial preservatives because oil is miscible with the resinous compounds already present in wood and wicks into the cell structure through capillary action. Water-based preservatives, by contrast, face resistance from any residual moisture in the wood and from the naturally hydrophobic character of wood cell walls. The comparison between used motor oil and commercial wood preservatives is instructive for understanding what the preservative industry is actually selling. The commercial wood preservative category includes several distinct product types. Creosote, the coal tar distillate mentioned above, is the most effective commercial preservative by most measures, lasting 30 or more years in ground contact applications. It is also the most toxic to humans and the environment, and its use has been restricted to professional applications. Residential use of creosote products is no longer permitted in the United States and most European countries. Chromated copper arsenate, CCA, was the standard pressure treatment compound for lumber sold at hardware stores for decades. The green color of pressure-treated lumber is the copper in CCA. CCA is highly effective against biological decay and has documented longevity exceeding 20 years in ground contact. It was restricted for residential use in 2004 because of concerns about arsenic leaching from treated lumber, particularly from decks and play structures where children might have skin contact. CCA-treated lumber is still used in commercial applications. The preservatives currently available for residential use, copper azole, alkaline copper quaternary, and various borate-based products, are significantly less effective than creosote or CCA. Research comparing the performance of post-2004 residential pressure-treated lumber to pre-2004 CCA lumber consistently finds that modern treated lumber has shorter effective service life, particularly in ground contact applications. Used motor oil fills a performance gap that the regulatory restriction of the most effective preservatives has created. In ground contact applications, fence posts, deck supports, retaining wall timbers, used motor oil treatment before installation provides hydrocarbon-based protection similar in mechanism to creosote, which is the benchmark for longevity in these applications. The agricultural and rural construction communities that have used motor oil for generations were not making a compromise choice. They were using what they understood from experience to be the most effective available treatment for the applications they were protecting. Their fence posts last. The practical application of used motor oil to wood is straightforward, but requires attention to method for maximum effectiveness. The most effective application method is hot treatment, heating the used oil to approximately 60 to 80 degrees Celsius before applying it to the wood. Hot oil has significantly lower viscosity than cold oil, which dramatically improves penetration into the wood cell structure. The difference in penetration depth between hot and cold oil application can be several centimeters for thick timbers. For fence posts and structural members that will be in ground contact, penetration depth directly determines longevity. The deeper the oil penetrates, the longer the protection persists as the outer surface weathers. Heating used oil can be done simply in a metal container over a heat source. The oil does not need to be brought to boiling. It needs to be fluid enough to penetrate the wood readily, which occurs at the temperatures described. Standard safety precautions apply. Heated oil can cause burns and should not be heated near open flames at high temperatures. The wood should be dry before treatment. Wet wood has its cell structure partially occupied by water, which limits oil penetration. Allowing wood to dry thoroughly, ideally kiln-dried or air-dried to below 20% moisture content, before treatment maximizes the penetration depth achievable with hot oil. Application is by brush, by immersion for small pieces, or by flooding the end grain of posts before installation. End grain, the cut surface perpendicular to the wood fiber direction, absorbs moisture and organisms far more readily than face grain and is the primary pathway for decay in fence posts and structural timbers. Thorough end grain treatment is the single most important step in extending the service life of ground contact wood. For fence posts specifically, the most effective treatment protocol is to stand the posts with their ground contact ends submerged in hot used oil for several hours before installation. This allows maximum oil uptake into the end grain and the section of the post that will be in ground contact, the section most vulnerable to decay. The post section above ground should also be treated by brush application, with particular attention to any checks or cracks that have already formed, as these are the primary pathways for moisture and organism entry into the above ground section. The environmental considerations associated with used motor oil deserve honest examination, because the preservative use of motor oil is not without environmental implications, and understanding them is necessary for responsible application. Used motor oil contains hydrocarbon compounds and small concentrations of heavy metals, particularly lead, zinc, cadmium, and chromium, that accumulate from engine wear and the additives in motor oil formulations. In ground contact applications, some of these compounds can leach from treated wood into surrounding soil. The leaching rate is slow. Motor oil does not dissolve readily in water, But over the decades-long service life of a treated post, some soil contamination in the immediate vicinity of the post is likely. For fence posts in agricultural fields, this leaching into agricultural soil is a legitimate concern that farmers using the practice have largely accepted as a trade-off against the practical necessity of durable post installation. For residential applications, treatment of posts before installation, adequate distances from vegetable gardens and water sources, and limiting treatment to structural applications rather than decorative wood minimizes the environmental impact. The alternative, pressure-treated lumber with copper azole, also leaches copper into surrounding soil, and copper is toxic to soil organisms at elevated concentrations. The choice between used motor oil and commercial preservatives is not between a contaminating approach and a clean one. It is between different contamination profiles with different performance characteristics. The responsible use of used motor oil as a wood preservative is limited to structural applications, where durability is the primary concern, where alternatives are less effective, and where the environmental context, distance from water, soil type, sensitivity of adjacent planting, permits the application without creating unreasonable contamination risk. Here is the market structure that explains why this practice is unknown to most homeowners while being standard on farms. The wood preservative industry generates approximately $1 billion in annual retail sales. The products, deck stains, fence sealers, end cut sealers, wood preservatives, are sold at prices ranging from $15 to $40 per liter. The active chemistry in most of these products is copper compounds, borate compounds, or petroleum-derived compounds. The petroleum-derived products in particular are doing the same job that used motor oil does through the same hydrocarbon toxicity mechanism at a significant markup. Used motor oil is a waste product. It has no retail price. It is the byproduct of engine maintenance that households perform regardless. Auto service centers accumulate it in quantities and are required by regulation to dispose of it through recycling programs. In most jurisdictions, collecting your own used oil from your vehicle for legitimate reuse, including as a wood preservative, is legal. Taking used oil from a service center for this purpose occupies a more complex regulatory position that varies by jurisdiction. The homeowner who changes their own oil generates approximately 4 liters of used oil per oil change, enough to treat a substantial length of fence post or a significant area of exterior timber. 4 liters of commercial wood preservative at $15 per liter is $60. The used oil costs nothing. The farm community has always understood this arithmetic. The suburban homeowner, buying products at the garden center based on label claims and marketing, has not been given the opportunity to make the same calculation. Here is the synthesis. Wood in outdoor applications deteriorates through biological decay, moisture cycling, and UV degradation. Effective preservation addresses the first 2 pathways through toxic hydrocarbon compounds that prevent biological colonization and oil-based hydrophobicity that reduces moisture uptake. Used motor oil provides both mechanisms: petroleum hydrocarbon toxicity to decay organisms and strong water repellency through the same chemistry as creosote, the benchmark commercial preservative, at a fraction of the cost. Hot application to dry wood with thorough end grain treatment for ground contact sections produces penetration depth that equals or exceeds most commercial water-based preservatives. Agricultural communities in North America, Australia, and Europe have used this practice for generations. Their fence posts last for decades. The commercial preservative industry has no interest in connecting the used oil in your driveway to the rotting wood in your backyard. 1 oil change, 4 liters, $60 of preservative for free. If this changed how you think about the used oil from your next oil change, hit the like button. Share it with someone replacing rotting fence posts with expensive pressure-treated lumber, and subscribe for more of what the industry prefers you never figure out.